Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading John Locke's second treatise in government. Today we are doing, I'm just kind of centered up for I'm just a little centered, let me get it right, a little better. Today we're doing chapter 3, which is on the state of war. So last chapter 2 was state of nature, where he kind of presents his state of nature, which looks kind of different than the state of nature of Hobbes. Now we get the state of war, right? Chapter 16. The state of war is the state of enmity and destruction, and therefore declaring by word or action, or not a passionate and hasty, but a sedate, settled design upon another man's life, put him in a state of war with him against whom he has declared such an intention, and so has exposed his life and others to others' power to be taken away by him or anyone that joins with him in his defense and espouses his quarrel. It be reasonable and just, I should have a right to destroy that which threatens me with destruction. For by the fundamental law of nature, man being to be preserved as much as possible, when he cannot be preserved, the safety of the innocent is to be preferred. The safety of the innocent to be preferred. And one may destroy a man who makes war upon him, or has discovered an enmity to his being, for the same reason that he may kill a wolf or a lion, because such men are not under the ties of common law of reason. The common law of reason have no other rule but that of force and violence, and so may be treated as beasts of prey, those dangerous and noxious creatures that will be sure to destroy him, whatever he falls into their power. So wait a minute. How is this different? I mean, given what he says, that there's going to be people who are like beasts and animals and vicious and want to do things and want to harm you and want to steal what you want, but that's against the law of nature. But it's going to happen, and you have a right to protect yourself. And this leads us to this. And once you're in the state of war, you can do violence to other people. What for Hobbes, the state of nature is the state of war, right? What Locke does here is separate them, but the separation is apparent and and verbal, because everything what he says in this paragraph is possible and likely to happen. But Locke says, "Oh no, because people will follow their conscience." Right? In the previous chapter, "Oh no, it's not this bad because people have goodwill and they're not going to do it. They really like their fellows, but now they don't." Okay, so what happened here? Why did this? Now the argument usually is, well, scarcity. There's lack of resources, and therefore they don't. They something happens and they come in competition. As long as they're not in competition, people will be left happy. But now that there's competition, there's going to be people fighting over it, and Well, let's see what happens. Chapter 17. And hence it is that he who attempts to get another man into his absolute power does therefore put him into the state of war with him. It being to be understood as a declaration of a design upon his life. For I have reason to conclude that he who would get me under his power without my consent would use me as he pleased, when he had got me there, and destroying me too when he had fancy for it. But for nobody can desire to have me in his absolute power unless it's to compel me by force to do that which is against the right of my freedom, i.e., to make me a slave. So, in other words, anyone who has absolute power, the power to make you, in other words, anyone who's going to exercise absolute power over you, to make you do what they want you to do, and you don't consent to it, and that you are like a slave to them. This is the state of war. Therefore, slaves are anyone who's a slave, anyone who is being dominated over by the power of others, has this is in a situation where they don't have they no longer have any, they have no power over themselves. In other words, he seems to argue that a slave is constantly in a state of natural, in a condition of war, in this sense that someone, that if anyone has absolute power to do what they want, means that they can harm you and kill you because they have the power to do it. And as long as it doesn't if it fancies them, they do. In other words, again, if it fancies them to do it, they'll do it. Now, this is Hobbes makes this. Now, Hobbes is saying this is the inevitable consequence of the fact that in nature one has the right to do whatever one wants, right? And everyone has that right. And in nature there's no judge. There's no way to say one whose right is more just. That every right is equally valid to every other right. That's the Hobbes position in his state of nature. But Locke doesn't. Locke is saying about that. Locke doesn't do that. Right? He says, in the earlier chapter, there was this natural reason and this law of nature with conscience and things like this, which constrain men from doing that. But now, all of a sudden, men do that. Okay? Men want to have power over other men. Men want to take their goods and lives, even their bodies, and to make them do what they want to do with it. Okay? Make them and to deprive people of their freedom of their own bodies and their own thing. And he says that therefore they're like a slave. I'll continue. To be free from such force is the only security for my preservation, and reason binds me to look on him as the enemy to my preservation, who would take away that freedom which is the fence to it, so that he who makes an attempt to enslave me, therefore puts me into a state of war with him. So once anyone deprives, now to deprive you your freedom, to protect yourself, and to control your own actions and to control your things, is to put yourself under the absolute power. And this is what, to be under someone else's absolute power, and that means that they have the right and the ability to do whatever they want to you and make you do what they want you to do. This is to be a slave. And if you're a slave, this is to be, and to be a someone, and to have someone trying to treat you as a slave is that you're in a constant state of war. In other words, therefore, because it's that the power, the way he says, the destruction, a state of enmity and destruction. Okay, that he stopped in 16. Now he goes, reason that he in the state of nature would take away the freedom that belongs to anyone in that state, but necessarily be supposed to have a design to take away everything else, that freedom being the foundation of all the rest. In other words, if you're going to take away my freedom, you're going to take away my life and my property as well. Okay. In other words, everything else. In other words, you take my freedom, you take everything else. You're going to take everything else as well. That in the state of society would take away freedom belonging to those that society or commonwealth must be supposed to design to take away from them everything else. So be looked as on the state of war. Now let's take that line again. So, the freedom being the foundation of all the rest, and that he that in the state of society would take away the freedom belonging to those that of society or commonwealth must be supposed to design to take away from them everything else, and so to be looked on as the state of war. Section 18. That this makes it lawful for a man to kill a thief who has not yet in the least hurt him, nor declared any design upon his life any further by the use of force, so to get him in his power, and to take away his money or what he pleases from him, because using force where he has no right to get me into his power, let his pretense be what it will. I have no reason to suppose that he who would take away my liberty would not, when he had me in his power, take away everything else. And therefore it is unlawful for me to treat him as one who has put himself in a state of war with me. Now, it is therefore, and therefore it is lawful for me to treat him as one who has put himself in a state of war with me, i.e., kill him if I can, for to hazard, for to that hazard does he justly expose himself. Whomever induces a state of war is an aggressor in it. In other words, whoever creates the war is the aggressor in it. Whoever tries to take something from someone else. Anyone who uses force, like the theft is the use of force to take something from someone else. Therefore, force, you have, since force is being used, you have the right to use force to prevent force, to punish or to stop the person who's using force to do it. Okay, that's this very Lockean. This is, this kind of maybe explains American ideas of, you say Americans, why do you shoot? Why can someone shoot someone trespassing their land? Why don't you call the police? No, 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 because you have the right to. This is the idea that in nature, in natural law, natural justice, you have the right to protect yourself, and if someone breaks the law, then therefore they're an enemy to society and to you, and you can use as much force as you can to deal with it in this private transaction. Now, society would like to regulate this, right? Always likes to regulate what is society always seeks to regulate something that in nature would be absolute. Okay, that's the difference, and that's the difference between the state of nature versus the state of society and the state of government. Section 19. And here we have the plain difference between the state of nature and the state of war, which, however, some men have confounded. That's Locke. He's kind of suggesting, Locke is suggesting something, not that's Locke, that's Hobbes. He's kind of like pretending that Hobbes creates the two. But, Mr. Locke, you're not really, this is not as, yes, you sound like you're making it different, but the difference is merely the intention of the actor at the moment. Confounded and are far distinct as the state of peace, goodwill, and mutual assistance and preservation, and the state of enmity, malice, and violence, and mutual destruction are from one another. So he makes this nice sounding thing that these two things, peace and a goodwill and mutual assistance and preservation, but in other words, mutual assistance and preservation isn't this really the product of society? Now Hobbes is a little more honest here. Hobbes argues that I'm sorry, you only have peace, these things of goodwill, mutual assistance, and preservation in society. Outside of society, you only have enmity, malice, violence, and mutual destruction. Okay, men living together according to reason, without a common superior on earth, which authority to judge between them is properly in the state of nature. So wait a minute, if it's in the state of nature, there's no judge to judge between them, right? But okay, but that's a problem. Why? Because what happens when I want to take your thing? Oh, but it's not right. Okay, but who's going to stop me? Everyone's only stopped someone. Everyone is left to stop to help themselves, nothing more. But force or a declared design of force upon the person of another, where there are no common superior on earth to appeal to for relief, is the state of war. Okay, so wait a minute. If there's no one to appeal to say that that's stop, That state of war. So war can only happen in the state of nature. Whoa. Because in a society, there is an authority to appeal to. In a government, a society with a government, where there's some judge and authority to appeal to stop it, there's not war. War can be dealt with. That's crime. And that there's a punishment for that. Those actors will be punished. But because now the relations between states, because they exist in anarchy, there is no society of there's no political society or government that has authority over states, unless until they do, and then there's no longer anarchy. There's no longer the state of nature, right? The state of war, and it is the want of such an appeal gives a man a right of war even against an aggressor, though he be in society and a fellow subject. In other words, so therefore, even if, in other words, once someone uses aggression towards you, you have the right to self-defense, right? Even in society, it seems to be the argument. Okay. Okay. So, in other words, the logic here is that you have the right to self-defense is absolute. The right to your life, the right to preserving your life is absolute. And this cannot be thrown away or given away. So therefore, the fact that someone uses force against you, you have the right to protect your life and protect yourself of this to a degree of this, right? And he says that's the logic, right? Thus, a thief whom I cannot harm, but by appeal to the law, for having stolen all that I am worth, I may kill when he sets on to rob me, but of my horse or my coat, because the law which was made for my preservation, where he cannot interpose to secure my life from where it cannot impose to secure my life from present force, which if lost is capable of no reparation, permits me my own defense, and the right of law, a liberty to kill the aggressor, because the aggressor allows not time to appeal to a common judge, nor the decision of the law for remedy in a case where the mischief may be irreparable. So something that's irreparable and immediate, and there's no time to an appeal. You're no longer under this. You have a right. You retain the right to preserve yourself, to protect yourself, and to use the amount of force necessary to do so. Okay. Um, this is basically the English law of this, the common law practice of this. Um, so now let's turn to this, right? Um, Want of a common judge with authority puts all men in a state of nature. Force without right upon a man's person makes a state of war. So once force is introduced in the state of nature, a force of one person or anything on another person, that's the state of war. Okay. Uh, 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 um, Both where there is and is not a common judge. So force without right upon a man's person makes a state of war. And this is both true in the state of nature or that, but only when there's no common judge and authority. This is state of nature. So even if there is a common judge, someone who uses violence or force, one is still able. This is also war as well. So crime is a form of war in this sense. Violent crime is a form of war in Locke's argument, if you follow Locke's argument. And this is what's so powerful, but this is why some people like Locke say, listen, hey, when government, when there's all this, the BLM bullshit of that. No. Sorry. If you break the law and you resist arrest, the cop will kill you. You know, you're lucky. You know, you're breaking the law. And okay, society may say, oh, no, don't do that, but no. I'm sorry, we're not going to tolerate rioting. We're not going to tolerate. Protest is not rioting. Therefore, you're violating the peace and property of other people. No, no. You, sorry. Um, they have, if the police aren't going to protect them, then people have the right to use violence to and kill the protesters and violators. That's that famous scene in those two liberal white people, very left. They were very progressive left people, but when they developed their old mansion, and in St. Louis, when the Black Lives Matter crowd was moving to burn, coming down and maybe burning out, they just looted and burned and everything else. They pulled their guns out on them. They slew liberals. And then what happened was the district attorney said, "Oh, no, no! How dare you point the guns at people like that?" And try to cross that famous scene. Well, in a sense, this is the problem. Um, Locke. This is why Lockean understanding is no longer believed anymore. We don't have, Locke. The Lockean perception is, we don't. I mean, this idea that we live in civil society, we shouldn't have that. No, no, no. If you accept the Lockean society, that this idea of society is this in this structure, the second that the society doesn't enforce the law anymore, doesn't protect the law, you're in a state of nature. Therefore, and any time that force is being used, then everyone has the right to use violence against those who use force. So shoot the illegal aliens. If the government is not going to stop enforce the law, and these people are stealing and thieving and robbing, then private people have the right to use violent authority. Like when the looters come in and steal the store company should have, the owners of the store themselves or hire people should shoot them. Oh my God, we're going to get demonetized. But that's the logic of Locke's argument up here. Okay, that in a state of war, the people who as the people who are engaging in the crime are the aggressor and using absolute power. Then by taking and stealing, and taking and doing things like they're doing, are using force against others, and therefore depriving them of their safety and their possessions and their lives. In that sense, Locke is arguing. 20. But when the actual force is over and the state of war ceases between those who are in society and are equally on both sides subject to fair determination of the law, because then there lies an open remedy for appeal for past injury and to prevent future harm. But where no such appeal is, as in the state of nature, for want of positive law and judges with authority to appeal to, the state of war once begun continues with a right to the innocent party to destroy the other whenever he can, until the aggressor offers peace and desires reconciliation on such terms as may repair the wrong he has already done, and to secure the innocent for future, nay, where the appeal, where an appeal to the law and constitute judges lie open, but the remedy is denied by the manifest perverting of justice and a barefaced wrestling of the law to protect or indemnify the violence or injuries of some men or the party of men. There is hard to imagine anything but a state of war. In other words, this is Locke's condemning a common. This line from Locke is blatantly condemning everything in America right now, BLM and the government and politicians bending the knee not to offend the woke and the wokeati and these things because they might be. In other words, Locke. I mean, this is the point of. This is why Locke. This is the libertarian Locke, right? This is the Locke of the libertarian and the minimalist government. But this Locke then says that that's a state of war. If government is not protecting the law, if government is not securing the rights and not remedying the problem, but the argument goes the opposite. Well, what about the remedying of the injustice done to other people? Well, that's okay, great. Then you're going to argue that uh, maybe there can be no remedy because slavery was unjust by its very nature, and there can be no remedy but to them to do violence to everyone else, right? That's the then. But wait a minute. By that logic, you understand the problem about that? Then there can be no restitution, no peace between those who have done wrong or really harm to each other, and therefore the only solution is to kill or be killed or separate. Right? That's that is a dark, dark, dark problem. In other words, that there is no. In other words, once slavery, because of slavery, this is this war. You can't escape it, and that once in the state of war, there's only kill to survive or make submit to make peace. Okay. Um, okay. This is the problem here. This is the logic of what Locke takes us to. In other words, a reconciliation, appeal to law, prevent. This is that whole idea of this. In other words, this is that line here, and he goes, let's continue here where it is. But anything but a state of. Let's do this. Let's start up here. This colon lies open, but the remedy denied, manifest perverting justice, and a barefaced wrestling, barefaced wrestling of the laws to protect or indemnify the violence or injuries of some men or a party of men. There is hard to imagine anything but the state of war. Colon. For whatever violence is used, the injury done, though by hands appointed to administer justice, it is still violence and injury, however colored with the name, pretenses, or forms of law. The ends, wherefore, being to protect and redress the innocent by an unbiased application of it to all who are under it, wherever that is not bona fide done, war is made upon the sufferers. Whoa! Therefore, the argument is that if justice is not being done and that restitution is not being made, and even that is being and that a force is being used by the authorities to advance one group and not punish another, not doing this, even though it's done by the instruments of law, but is done in contravenience to what's expected by law, this is a state of war. So a government can wage war on its people. And what does he say here? A war is made upon the sufferers who have no appeal on earth to right them. In other words, there's no appeal. They are only left to the remedy that is an appeal to heaven. Now, the word appeal to heaven is this idea that what is an appeal to heaven? This is, there's no judge or anything. This is self-help. Therefore, an appeal to heaven is the right, literally from the, I'm going to just throw it to God. This doesn't mean just surrender and do nothing. It means no. I'm going to use violence. I'm going to grab my gun and I'm going to go kill as many people who's dangerous to me as possible. In other words, I'm going to wage war on them as well. They're waging war on me. I have a right to wage war on them, and that's the appeal to heaven. This is what is meant by the appeal to heaven. The appeal to heaven is not, and therefore, in war, who determines who's going to be the victor? God will determine who's going to be the victor. Well, in reality, it's the one who wins, right? But then again, this is the idea that all things, this is the providential view that, whatever happens because God determines it in one sense. But, we can be cynical about it, saying, no, that's what people say, to legitimize it. But he's saying here, at the end of 20, is that the appeal, in other words, the only appeal, when the government is waging war on the people, their own people, and there's he says, what is that line? Whatever there is not bona fide done of enforcing the law, enforcing what is requirement by society, by the officials in this, war is being made on the sufferers, right? Who have no appeal on earth to right them. There's no authority. Therefore, they only the only things left remedy is the appeal to heaven. This is the appeal. This, and what is this? They individually just waging war back as best they can on those who do it. Okay, so what does this mean? Suicide bombers? Yes. I'm sorry, asymmetrical warfare. This is the reality of what war of all means. In this sense, a war. The state of war is war. As Nathan Bedford Forrest says, war means killing. It's the use of force and violence to get what you want. And those who use force and violence against you, you have the right to use force and violence against them to stop them. This is the condition of war. 21. To avoid the state of war, wherein there is no appeal but to heaven, and wherein the least difference is apt to end, where there are no authority to decide between the contenders. In other words, if there's no authority to decide between the contenders, who's going to be the contender? In other words, to avoid this state of war, wherein there's no appeal but to heaven, and wherein the least difference is apt to end. It's apt to end in this kind of no appeal, where there is no authority to decide between the contenders, is one great reason of men putting themselves into society. In other words, this is the switch. This is interesting. Before we talk about men in community, now he talks men in society. See, Locke is the person who flips between. Earlier he talked about society, community. Now he talks about society. Locke, Locke seems to does a bait and switch of these two terms, make them say they are the same thing. Okay, but in the Latin they're not. Okay, in the Latin origins of these words, community and society are different, fundamentally not the same. But Locke now brings society here, right? He says that this is the reason why men put themselves into society and quitting the state of nature. So, not in other words, for where there is an authority, a power on earth from which relief can be held by appeal, the continuance of the state of war is excluded, and the controversy is decided by that power. Locke is being clear. Once there is an authority that has the power to enforce his decision, and that authority has the will and does decide the decision between the contesting parties, and has the means to remedy or punish or to give have to have the means to do this. Then, therefore, you must this will be decided. The state of war is excluded if there. In other words, if he has that ability to do this, the controversy decided by that in power. Had there been any such court, any superior jurisdiction on earth to determine the right between Jebita and the Ammonites, they had never come to a state of war. But we see he was forced to an appeal to heaven. The Lord, the judge, says he says to be the Lord, the judge, says he, be judge this day between the children of Israel and the children of Ammon. Judges Book of Judges, book 11, verse 27. Right, this is again the scripture quote, and this is the Book of Judges about this is not anarchy. This is the nation of Israel and the government under Moses and that Joseph, I think, established. Not Joseph. I'm going to get in trouble for this. The second book after I'm going to get my mind is going blank. Minute I finish this video, I remember it. Okay, I just came back. Joshua, the book of Joshua, Moses and the Ten Commandments and the rules and the plan for what was to be, but Moses himself couldn't come back. Joshua creates the structure of the government, that of the judges, the rule of the judges, and that in the book of Judges, what happens is that when there's a conflict, the Lord will decide. Right, the Lord is the true king of Israel. God is the true king of this and king of everyone, and that therefore this only such thing. And this is from the book of Daniel. And then prosecuting and relying on his appeal, he leads out an army to battle, and therefore in such controversies, where the question is put, who shall be judge? In other words, this is what law appeal to heaven means. That to rely on God as the authority, and what is that to be put in? To appeal to heaven is to what? That the dispute, and that God will decide this, and how is God going to decide it? Well, your two armies go out in the field in battle and duke it out, and the winner is whom God chose to win. Okay, it cannot be meant who shall decide the controversy. Everyone knows that Jebita here tells us that the Lord, the judge, shall judge. Where there is no judge on earth, the appeal lies to God in heaven. That question then cannot mean who shall judge whether another has put himself in a state of war with me, and whether I may, as Jephthah did, appeal to heaven in it, or that I myself can only be judge in my own conscience, as I will answer it at the great day to the supreme judge of all mankind. In other words, at the end of the day, I have to, when I do the war, and I do it, even if I make my act, I'm going to be held just. I'm going to be judged by God. As the nations fight in that moment, judge, let God decide. If I made the wrong decision, I will be held judge. That's that famous line. That therefore, everyone, there is, in other words, there is a judge. That is God. But wait a minute. Then if there is a judge who has authority to enforce things, then there's no state of nature. Then is there? You see the problem with this? If there is a God who has authority to judge, and we judge in this appeal to heaven, that this is a legitimate, or is this merely the appeal to heaven means the appeal to chance? Okay, there's no real God there, and then whoever wins wins, and it's a fait accompli, and that's if you use the French, fait accompli. In other words, fact, they won, these are destroyed. It's a fact. Fait accompli, it's completed, done. The thing is resolved. That is a thing that Locke is kind of playing with in here. He's relying on our Christian beliefs to kind of mask the more odious argument of the fait accompli. But the argument of the appeal to heaven does imply a fait accompli. So what happens when the reality of the situation means that there's no way you can win? The argument is maybe it's better to die that way. I mean, is it better to be a slave, or is it better to die a free person than to be a slave? Okay, that does and being a slave, the willingness to be a slave, does this say something about the lack of moral character of people who are slaves? You understand that's the implication of this, the logic of this model. We're going to end here. It's going to be controversial and it'll probably get demonetized because or get violate YouTube's rules. Who knows? If you have any comments or questions, please put them below. If you like it, it's not like I say, "Oh, you've been politically incorrect." No, I'm just reading Locke and explaining it, trying to understand it, engaging you with it more than I normally do, because this is a text that requires the language itself requires some kind of contextualization, and to see the logic of what's going on here. Um, if you have any questions, I'll answer them when I see them. Um, if you don't like what I did, you can always say no, explain why you don't like it. Um, you can follow if you want to subscribe and join and share with a friend this video with a friend. Please do so. If you want to follow me on social media, the information is below. If you want to help me do more of these videos and do more of these things, I still do them, because I do them. But a little bit of help wouldn't hurt. Please subscribe, star, and Patreon. Next time we meet, we'll do chapter 4. My wife just called when I was looking for the Bible. I forgot the thing, so I have dinner to go to. I'll do more recording probably soon. So have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.